Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new video series I hope to be doing over the next couple weeks as we start getting into draft season called Ones to Watch. For this video, we're going to be looking at players I think are of note going into this NFL draft that haven't gotten the media attention I do believe they should. Now, to keep in mind, at current time of recording, the NFL Combine and the pro days for these players has not yet happened. So my feelings on them might shift slightly before pro day happens. It doesn't often. There's a few exceptions, like Paris Ford last year was a player that drastically shot down my board after his combine. But usually my feelings feel pretty consistent after I've watched tape grades on them. So if you do like this video and you would like more content of it, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you. So the first player I want to talk about is Goedeke, a player not named Rayman out of CMU. Is his tackle partner actually. Goedeke immediately was noticeable to me. Like basically at impact, he just plays with a mean streak that a lot of these NFL teams really do covet. He's just very powerful. You see it in his hands as well when he tries to move guys out of the way. It's just a very balanced body, a very balanced frame that works in both these power and zone looks that really a lot of these teams run these multiple offenses, multiple gap schemes really like. So I think for him to not get basically any attention is quite odd to me. So if we're looking at the positives here, I talked about his power and just that nasty attitude that he plays with. Like he will finish a guy into the ground, which is quite impressive and quite something you want to see out of your tackle. He balances well. He's got the body control to like just centralize these rushers and just keep them within his grasp. The strength required when moving these players as well has been more than adequate. He's definitely not slow. I've watched him multiple times versus these multiple fronts where they have delayed blitzers or guys looping around. He did not struggle at all. And then you think, okay, well, what about his hips? Is he clunky to move? Not really. He's really good in these wide zone motions where he can get out front. He's got the smoothness to plant foot, turn inside if a guy tries to get the gap where the running back is. He really doesn't struggle in this. So when we're talking about his negatives, the only one I can really find is, it's really just his arm length. I mean, he's not an insane athlete. He's definitely a good one. So I'm not really gonna knock him for that. That might be something that might not get him drafted as early as some of these other guys we talked about, like Akeem Ekwonu maybe early. But he meets the typical threshold of 33 inches, which if you look at all starting NFL tackles, they all basically have that cutoff and above. There's really no one who starts below that, and most guys who do typically don't really work very well. It's just purely a reach thing when it comes to actually engaging with rushers. So that might limit him slightly. He reminds me very similar to Jack Driscoll, who went to the Eagles. He's still on the Eagles, actually. He's just a very solid floor player. He demonstrates good play strength, good versatility. I wouldn't be surprised if that arm length isn't very good. He ends up getting kicked inside to the offensive guard position. And I don't think he'll play bad there either. I think he absolutely can play that role. As I said, he demonstrates that very strong, centralized power. He moves guys out of the way. I think that'll help transition to the offensive guard if that's basically what ends up happening. I think he is about as solid a third round tackle as you can take. I mean, the tackle class isn't as thick as a lot of people have said before looking at the tape. After getting into it, I only have a couple guys that I think might be worth first to second round grades. So to find a guy that I've really not seen people talk about sit in the third, I think teams should absolutely be looking for him there. Now, another player that I thought was very interesting that has not really gotten media attention of kind of a similar idea is Marquise Hayes. Now, I'm usually not as big on these linemen from these bigger schools because often they do get away by using their athletic traits or coming from such talented organizations that they don't have to be as clean or as mentally sound as possibly someone from a much smaller school. That's really not the case with Marquise Hayes here. He's another guy that's just really tough. Like, it is hard to move him. He looks for work. Like, if you do not engage him immediately, he comes for either that nose tackle that sits over the center or the edge rusher who wants to kick it back inside. I have seen him lay guys out. He is not afraid to go look for contact. And that shows when he gets downfield as well. If you like to run a lot of these, I form zone runs that go between the guard and the tackle, or you like to run these powers where that guard is really responsible for sealing that edge or getting to the linebacker, he is phenomenal when it comes to that. He plays with a mean streak. And it's not just that either, because I said most of these guys have gotten away, at least in the last couple years, with not having as sound a technique as you'd hope or as strong as an IQ as you'd hope in play. Marquise does not have that problem at all. He picks up stunts and blitzes very well. He comes looking for help or looking to be the help when he sees guys coming late or guys start to come open. There is no issue with his NFL IQ at all. I would be very surprised if anyone ever questioned that about him. He plays with a very solid base, like power rushers. If you don't have that really finesse technique coming in on the inside, it is hard to move him off his base. So I think these teams that, especially the teams that run power like kind of schemes, like I said, downhill runs by halfback dives, halfback powers, all that kind of stuff, or like fake halfback dives where you get it to a different player. A lot of these teams are gonna love a player like this, and his technique is already sound enough that I honestly think he could start very early as a rookie. Now, the reason why he's not as high as someone, let's say Zion Johnson, who's sitting in the first round currently. Well, for one, the athleticism is good, but there's not some insane traits here that we might see out of some other players, right? We're talking about a guy, let's say a tackle like Daniel Falele, right? 6'8", basically 380. Well, that's an insane athlete, especially that he moves as well as he does. That's a guy who's probably going to get taken early just on those athletic tendencies alone. That's not Marquise Hayes. He doesn't have that stuff. However, he makes up for it with a lot of other good play, just strength and IQ. Now, I do worry he does sometimes play upright when he's looking at getting that stiff back to really just get a guy in his grasp. Which, if he does that too early, I have seen guys get out of this little trap. I don't think it'll be that big a deal down the line. I think a good team can get that out of him pretty quickly, but it's something you should take him note. Now, unlike with Goedeke, while his lateral motion is okay, it is a bit stiff. I would be worried about if someone does get free and tries to come in on the backside gap of him, about him being able to redirect and actually take that guy out. So this is why I think he's more a pro style, power style offensive guard. And I do believe he would be a better guard than center as well. I think he plays very well when he can just get to that second level and just get mean with the linebackers. I fully expect that he can compete for a starting role sooner rather than later. So for him, he's also a draft value of a third for me. I think he's a high end player that could be taken a lot earlier than people have suggested. Now, I tried to do some players that were more of note. I said at the start. However, I felt like I just had to talk about David Bell out of Purdue. This guy basically gets no love from what I've seen. I have not seen a single scout or any kind of report from a team talking about how great David Bell is. And I feel like I have to do it. Because this guy, in almost any other draft, would be talked about as probably a late first round player. Pretty cleanly. His hand-eye coordination in contrast with other players of that first round pedigree does stand out. He tracks the ball very well. And it's even shown when he has like these back shoulder throws that are thrown to him where he demonstrates also very good body control. He is just money on those. There's no stopping him when you get him in a one-on-one situation where he gets a quarterback that can place that ball on his back shoulder. He has really nice breaks in his routes. He sinks well. He makes a very hard cut. There is no rounding in that route. and he creates that separation at all three levels of the field. I've seen him take snaps in the slot, X, Y. He has had zero issues at all levels of the field creating separation. And it shows as well in his release. Now, his release isn't exceptional. I did rank it here as solid, as you can see. He can have some guys get a good jab on him getting into the outside. However, he makes up for that release with really good footwork, which then really complements his ability to break in those routes. So when we're talking about a player with as good at route running as that, then you start talking about, okay, well, how is he mentally? Bell is not afraid of contact at all. I've seen guys come hawk in on him over the field, and he goes right for the ball, right for the ball right in. He attacks the ball with his hands, not his body. It's it's really a nice thing to see when you see a player like this, and for him to do it so young is also impressive. He's only 21 years old. He's one of the younger players in the draft class, which is another thing that, as a team, if I was looking in on this, I'd want a player that's a little younger if I can mold them a bit. And if they're already showing these really nice tendencies, that's exciting for me. I'd be very pleased to take him. And for him to probably be someone who's going to fall in this draft class, I mean, I would be very excited at the idea of getting a David Bell. Now, when we're talking about David Bell in comparison to these other first round receivers, what are the negatives? What pushes him slightly further back? Well, one thing I do want to note is his run blocking is quite poor from what I've seen. He attacks quite high, quite off balance, which while it doesn't sound like a big thing, a lot of these modern teams really value run blocking. You see the Chargers talking about a lot. We have 13 teams in the league that currently run what's called the West Coast Shanahan system, where it's really easy for these guys on their routes. However, maybe a good third of the time they're blocking and run blocking, and they can be key in their run blocking. So for him to really not be as good at that early on, it's going to be a negative for a lot of teams. I would expect about half the league to have that as a legit negative on him. Another thing that we should really question is this has been kind of a newer thing. Bell has always been kind of just good. This year was really his breakout year. When we're comparing a player like Bell to someone, let's say, John Mechie, Mechie's been productive, but and that's saying Mechie's been productive at Alabama behind other talent. We've seen these Alabama receivers just coming out in the first round to like it's nothing. It's incredible how many they've created. So for him to be comparing to those guys who have shown their ability, have shown the production against high-end defensive players for much longer, some teams will value that more. And the last real thing, I think this is the thing you're going to always see people knock on Bell. He's not this quick twitch, like explosive athlete that a lot of these teams like really look for early, right? This is the kind of things that gets Henry Ruggs drafted early, right? It's the kind of thing that like John Brown, who always has this insane, deep threat that has got him a lot of jobs throughout the league. Deshaun Jackson at 34 is the same thing, right? He's lost a lot of what else made him special with age. However, he still has that explosive athleticism getting downfield. And that's just not Bell's game. He doesn't have it. He's a good athlete. He's solid. I don't think you'll have any problems with him. I think he could run somewhere in the 4.4s, 4.5s maybe, if he has a good day. But he's not really going to explode out of this stance. He's really not going to just burn a guy over the top unless he's got good technique. So when you're comparing him versus, Jameson Williams, Olave, Burks, like it's hard to compare those guys when you can clearly see the explosiveness traits in those players already, especially since they've been doing it for longer. So it's a legitimate knock on Bell, but I really don't think it's gonna matter as much as some people do, and we've seen this in the past. These guys can create that separation that athleticism would give other players via route running and understanding spacing, which is things Bell has already shown that he's understood at this level. He's basically a do-it-all receiver. He does not take plays off. He doesn't cheat in his route running by rounding them out. he's basically a student of the game, and I really think a high-end offensive coordinator really can mold this player into something special. So while I personally have him ranked in the first to second, don't be surprised if you see Bell sitting there later and he breaks out. This is not quite a Terry McLaurin thing, but look for some kind of similar production that could happen in year two. So another receiver that really didn't get much talk, and even after his little breakout at the Senior Bowl, still hasn't gotten too much talk, is Calvin Austin the third. He is kind of unique. He's really of this new age type slot player where, typically these guys who are under, 5'10", maybe even 5'9", right, wasn't really talked about. They weren't really drafted because people just thought it was really hard to kind of get them the ball. Well, in the last couple of years, we've seen these players start getting drafted or as a UDFA make a roster, and teams have been using them because if you're a good enough athlete and you understand the game well enough, it doesn't really seem to matter. And Calvin Austin looks to be another one of those players. He's shown the speed required to turn upfield from the slot, which is something that's also very valuable. I don't think he's got blazing speed, but he's definitely got enough that you line him up in the slot position, he can get, north-south pretty quickly. Now, his release is pretty good as well. If a guy does not get his hand on him initially, it's basically over. And it showed at the Senior Bowl in those one-on-ones. No one could really get a hand on him or really just stop him. The moment he got that release, guys were tripping over themselves. He had these really nice quick feet that while a guy was taking his stride, he would just plant foot or fake inside and cut it out. Like, it was so hard for these taller corners to really do anything with him that I think it's really what separated him from a lot of these other guys at the Senior Bowl. And that separation is going to be key in the NFL as a smaller guy, right? He's not really going to outmuscle guys to get the ball. So he's going to have to be able to create separation from the slot. So the fact that he sinks as well as he does and he can sell a route so well. I've seen him sell the out route to then cut it upfield as a post, and the DB was nowhere close to him. I think it's going to be a lot of things that teams covet. He's got the quick feet to do the stutter routes, the hand-eye coordination to actually track the ball. It showed well in poor weather on day 2 of the Senior Bowl as well. Guys were on him a lot more than they usually were, and he still tracked the ball in, like no issues at all. When they were doing the 3-on-3s, or 2-on-3s, pardon me, where 2 receivers against 3 DBs, he still found gaps to get open and be open for that quarterback to hit him in between these zone coverage looks that they were giving them. So that's something that's going to be very valuable for a smaller guy like him. Now, getting on to the negatives here, his height is an obvious limiter. While they are being used more in the modern NFL, he is strictly regulated to the slot. He probably will have to be used on gadget rolls every now and then. And for him to be out there as often as you'd probably like, he's going to have to continue to show that hand-eye coordination to catch the balls in poor weather through contact. He's going to have to keep showing that. Because if he doesn't, well, that's going to limit how often he's going to be actually able to be on the field. Right? So I talked about his release, about guys really struggling to get their hands on him. Well, if you watch his tape, when a stronger guy does get his hands on him at the line of scrimmage, they push him around, right? He's a 5'7", 170 guy. Like he's very light and very short. I would not expect him to outmuscle through that or be able to win through that. So if a guy does get his hand on him, he's really not getting open quick. So it is going to really rely on his feet to create that separation at release and in his breaks. And a big thing that I'd say when we're talking about these guys is basically the athlete that they are. We saw Rondale Moore get selected really early last year. Rondale Moore is a superb athlete at 5'7". He is incredible and he's probably one of a kind. Calvin Austin cannot compete with that. That just can't happen, right? No one at Rondale, no one's gonna be like Rondale Moore and jumping insane verticals, much higher than even guys, who are 6'1" can't even jump. That's just not happening. So he's not that insane athlete, which is also going to lower his stock. But with what we see these new creative offenses doing, like you see Dable doing it, who just took a job at the Giants head coach. You saw Sean Payton when he was in the league. He got that going a lot at the Saints organization. I think teams should value him at about a fourth. Now, he could fall. I could see him fall into the sixth round. However, I'd value him a lot higher than that. I would value him right at fourth because I think he's got the talent that you'd want to see out of your receiver. So Christian Watson is the complete opposite type of player. He is 6'5", 200 out of a smaller school, North Dakota State. He's big, but he's not as filled out as a frame, right? Like if you're thinking about a 6'5" guy, you think about Mike Evans. Well, Mike Evans is a lot bigger than that. With that being said, Christian Watson's a little more unique than that. So for a difference here, Christian Watson shows really nice footwork for a player that large. And when I mean really nice, I mean it is extremely traitsy to see. It's very unique. So for him to move that smooth, like his hips are not clunky, he does not have clunky feet when he steps down. It's unique. It's very unique. The body control he has to also track that ball. I also mentioned the back shoulder throws here. He demonstrated that at the Senior Bowl being very well. So you basically you're getting the smooth footwork that you see out of a guy who's more like 6 foot, while also getting that big body play out of a guy who's 6'5". It's a very interesting blend. And he also shows really good footwork for a guy who sits, who's going to be sitting at that boundary all the time. When he gets that back shoulder, he can keep both feet in bounds already. I've seen him do it. So for him to already have that so ingrained in him, I mean, that's going to make him more viable early. He's also a very sneaky athlete. And what I mean by that is when you look at these 6'5" guys, they're usually very good athletes, but you don't really expect them to create like a whole lot of separation or, be able to really sink in their routes and break out with explosiveness. Well, Watson does, and he does it consistently. And it showed at the Senior Bowl in these one-on-ones when he was getting matched up against much higher competition. They really couldn't hang with him. I don't know, think they know. I didn't think they knew what to do with him. It's like I can't play physical with the guy because the guy's gonna outbody me. Well, I also can't rely on my quickness to beat him because if I bite on something and it's a zig route, I bite on the outside and he cuts back in. Well, then he's got the speed and the athleticism to do it. It's really hard for these defensive backs to hang with him. Now, of course, when we're talking about these players, there's going to be some negatives. So he's from a small school, and he didn't face a lot of high-end comp. It doesn't often make that much of a difference at most positions. Receiver, I would say it does a little more often than others because they're going against coverages, against these safeties, sometimes linebackers, corners can be just manned up on them all the time. He didn't face as good a competition as he's going to face in the NFL while he was at college. Now, it wasn't an issue at the Senior Bowl, so I don't think it's going to be as something as note that maybe some teams will have. However, it's something that I feel like I had to mention just in case you do see him struggle early. That would probably be the issue. Now, while I said he is a sneaky athlete, this is not a high-end athlete. He's not going to run like a 4.3. Like he's not like a DK Metcalf where it's like, I don't understand a human who is that big, moves that fast. But he's a lot smoother than DK coming out. His hips are much nicer. And I did mention at the start that his frame isn't as filled out as other guys at his height. Now, it doesn't mean he's overly light, right? This is not Devontae Smith being like 165 at 6'2". He's still 200 pounds. He's still a pretty large guy. It's just something that if you're looking for a guy just to be the big body jump ball, that's not completely his game. I think you'd be missing aspects of his game. So for him to show as many surprising traits as he has before a combine or a pro days even happened, I at least have a 4th round grade on him. And if you see him run a 4.4 at this combine, put him right up into the second round for me because that he is such a unique player that I don't think you could pass up on him. Time to get to the running backs. I will say quickly, there are no tight ends. I feel like most of the tight ends occurring in my current evaluations were pretty close to what I have. There's a couple guys I have lower, but I didn't really want to talk about the guys I had lower. I wanted to be talking more about the guys I thought were not getting as much media attention. So if you see no tight ends on this, that's purely the reason why. So now running backs. This this player here in Jerome Ford was very unique to me. I I didn't get to watch as much tape during the season. Usually I watch most of my tape basically about mid-December is when I start going through multiple games in a row. I got to watch a Cincinnati Bearcats game I think about November, and I was watching Ritter because I knew Ritter was probably going to declare this year. I didn't think he wouldn't. So I was watching Ritter, and every time he handed the ball off, I was like, man, that running back is really explosive. Like he finds holes. He's got the long speed. Who is that running back? I've never seen this guy before. And for me to watch Cincinnati last year, and I liked Dokes. I thought Dokes was interesting. I'm like, this guy looks even better. Like, who's this? Well, that guy ended up being Jerome Ford. And Ford is probably one of the most slept on players in this draft. Just entirety. He is incredible. He has that incredibly filled out frame, 5'11", 220. He's that just he looks like a mauler basically at running back, right? And he's hard to move. Like he's got this wide running style where when guys try to come get him, he can either quickly just readjust the motion he's going in, or if they do go into contact with him, especially low, he can just take it. Like his contact balance is, I wouldn't say quite on the level of Javonte Williams, who we saw go a little earlier, but it's pretty unique. And for him to then pair that really nice, powerful contact balance running style with really nice, quick feet, he's a unique player. You can very clearly tell why Alabama had him on their team before he transferred because he's just unique, right? The tempo that he runs with as well, like he can get guys to set up. It's not quite Le'Veon Bell-esque when Bell was in his prime, but he can let his block set up. He can see a guy leaning and know, okay, this is the moment I get to plant foot, turn up field, hit the gap because that's about to open backside. He shows a lot of really nice vision and feel for how he should run, when he should slow down, when he needs to speed up. And when he speeds up, boy, does he move a lot faster than you think he can. He can break free in open field. I don't see him getting tracked down a lot from behind. So he's got all these really great running back traits, and I've seen no one talk about him. I've seen everyone talk about Spiller, Hall, Walker. No one talks about Jerome Ford. Like, okay, well, I like his running. How's he in pass pro? He's great in pass protection. This guy has no fear. Like an edge can come free, and I fully expect he will meet that edge. Like right man to man, he will meet that guy chest to chest. So he's got no issues in pass pro. I'm like, okay, there has to be some issues here. So I did find a couple after watching his tape a little more. He has no issues with his hands. His hands are great. However, Cincinnati did not really develop his route tree much. His route tree is check down, which means he's coming out on these little swing routes, maybe an out route, right? It's very simplistic. He's just supposed to get to a spot, and their quarterback will throw to him if there's nothing open downfield. So teams that really need a guy who can, break routes for these linebackers or maybe a slot guy, right, a slot DB, that's really not something he has. So it's something he's going to lack. You know, he's got, like I said, well, he's really got nice feet and quickness. He doesn't have really the shiftiness in his hips to make these guys miss consistently. It's not that he can't. I've seen him do it. It's just it's not when we're talking about Christian McCaffrey level or Alvin Kamara, where they just, you know, lean forward body, plant foot, guy goes flying 5 yards to the right. Like, it's not like that. He will not be sending guys flying to the side. He will run through them, though. He'll absolutely run through them. And the last thing that I would actually typically rank as a positive, but I do have a negative here. He's only got one season under his belt as a lead back. He's really not gotten a whole lot of playing time besides this last season. So some teams will that'll be a negative, but for me looking at this, I would typically rank that as a positive. He's got really fresh legs, like not a lot of tread on the tire at all. He's clearly developed his craft well. Mentally sound. You'll love the mentality as well. Like I said, the no fear in the blocking, the understanding of gap scheming and what's happening in front of him. My current draft value is a third to a fourth, but if I watch this combine and he performs well, that could easily shoot up to the second round, and he might be my RB2, just behind Walker, who's my currently RB1. He really impressed me, and for him to stand out like that just in the middle of the season, I'm not even watching him, I'm watching a different player. That's how you know a guy's unique. And speaking of unique, here's another running back that is kind of slept on. I've seen some more love for him as of late, but still nowhere near what I think he should be. Dameon Pierce. What can I say about what Florida did? I went through a lot of Florida tape over the last couple years, watching Pitts, Trask. I was watching Emory Jones in case he declared this year. I watched Pierce with his other running mate. Pierce really just stands out. He is an extreme compact bowling ball at running back. If you come hit him high, he has the contact balance and he'll still be up. He won't be down. You try to hit him low, he'll still be up. It is very hard to take Pierce down once he's got about, I don't know, 3 or 4 steps in roughly. It's really hard. He's got this almost Doug Martin type frame. So for him to have that frame and then play so energetic, like it's like an Energizer Bunny almost. The moment he gets the ball, it's just cut, hit, hole, downfield. Like it's so fast how fast he gets to deciding where he's going and then moving forward. I think it's going to be really nice. It's going to help him get on the field early. That first step is pretty nice as well. It's pretty explosive. Now it really tapers off later after those other steps. However, that first step is definitely explosive enough that if a guy comes free around, I don't think they'll get a hand on him. Or if they do, I think he'll be able to break it. So I think he can absolutely run this pulling zone scheme or wide zone scheme that a lot of these NFL teams are running currently with their running backs. And for him to pair such a large frame, and then you look at his route running as a running back, it's quite unique. He creates separation in these breaks versus guys who are completely manned up on him. Like that is their only assignment. And he's got guys like 8 yards behind him. It's not close. He's got very well above average route running for a rookie coming into this class, which for a guy that size makes him way more desirable in my opinion than a lot of these other guys you see, who are like 5'9", maybe they weigh 188 pounds, right? If they're actually got some weight on them that creates separation in route running. Pierce does all that at 215 and is a hard runner. I'd absolutely take Pierce instead. He's a hard fighter for yards. Like I said, he really is hard to bring down in these open fields. He fits through these tight openings as well in that Florida line. Like he just kind of makes holes sometimes when he doesn't get one. He'll just hit a spot and he's like, "Yep, I'm gonna make this a hole." So he is basically the complete role. He is a complete 3 down back. He'll be out there for your passing downs and for your first down run downs. I think a lot of teams are going to really love him, especially since he's so used to these split carrier systems where he's sharing the ball with 2 other running backs. I think a Shanahan team is going to love him as a player. Now, that split carries is also somewhat a negative because a lot of teams are going to see that and say, all right, he never won like the starting role. He was never in Jerome Ford position where he said, I'm going to take the starting role. You don't need anyone else out here. Some teams will see that as a negative. some teams will see that as a positive. I'm going to have it as a negative here, just so it does account for the fact that he probably is going to slip for a lot of teams that do like that lead back role. Now, he's a decent athlete, but his long speed is within about 15 yards. He's going to get tracked down from behind, more likely than not. Like, the only way he's going to get far downfield is if he breaks tackles going downfield. So, I think a lot of teams, when they look at a player like this, they do see him as only a split carry back, that someone who couldn't actually just lead the entire team in rushing, take the 80% of carries for a year. Like, it's just not something you're going to see. And while I did say he can kind of create holes, right, and it's kind of impressive, that impatience in waiting for gaps is also his downfall. When I said it takes him about 2 to 3 steps, right, for him to really get going after that first initial one. If he sees nothing and he just gets like no gap and he doesn't have the patience to kind of wait for something to open, right, comparing him to Jerome Ford, he just will try to make something happen. He'll just try to bull forward, which can work at the college level, right, when you're playing a much more various level of athletes. But when you're in the NFL, these guys are all pros. Like, that's not going to work every time you don't get a gap. They will absolutely come meet you in the hole and they'll punish you for it. So I think while it's impressive he can make gaps, I think that impatience in reading the gaps at the line of scrimmage does need a good amount of work. So I have him as a 4th round grade. I think that's probably not going to move very much for me. He shows a lot of really nice, solid running back tendencies, and along with a very well above average route running, which is very coveted in these modern schemes in the NFL. I think in the 4th round, you really couldn't go wrong. I think he absolutely should be your, RB7, RB8 off the board if we're talking about it in its entirety. Now, I've got 2 quarterbacks to talk about that are not the typical top 6 that everyone talks about, which one's better than which. I want to talk about some later guys in the draft because there was some tape of interest. The first one here is actually someone I've actually had on my board for over a year now in Kaleb Eleby. I noticed him when I was watching I'm forgetting his name. He went to Seattle. But the slot receiver out of Western Michigan the year before, Eskridge, pardon me. I was watching Eskridge and I was watching how Eleby was conducting the offense and I'm like, this guy feels really comfortable. Like, he manages this offense quite well. So I started watching Eleby a lot more, and I'm like, okay, so it's a predominantly RPO system. Showed good comfort in making that first read. Had no problem being a guy that would hand the ball off, 25 times a game, right? At least. So I started watching more. So I'm like, okay, well, let's take a look. How's he look throwing at all 3 levels of the field? Well, he's got a really nice deep ball, actually. Like, that spiral, no issue. There's no wobble to it, really. He can hit these really tight windows that not all quarterbacks can do because they don't have that really nice spiral on the ball, that accuracy that basically just floats off the fingertip. He's got it. I've seen him do it, like these really tight throws, and that's why he can really work in these RPO systems very well. And if you guys aren't familiar with RPOs, that means read pass options or run pass options, where the quarterback is going to be reading a section of the defense to understand whether he should hand the ball off to the running back or he'll rip the ball out before giving it to the running back and he'll throw to a route that is designed to get open if the defense shows that they're committing more to the run. This offense is essentially what won the Eagles their Super Bowl a few years back. And you see a lot of it at the current Eagles facility. You see a lot of it at the Colts facility. So for him to show so much comfort in this, right? It's quite nice. Like, a lot of teams should be looking at this later. He's got a really just thick frame. Like, if you look at him, he looks hefty. It's hard to see that and be like, okay, not a very long extensive injury history. I've seen him take the hits. He's got the frame to take the hits. means he's going to be available for you more often than not, which if you're going to be drafting a guy like this to be probably a backup QB, that's valuable. And then, okay, you look at a guy like this, you're like, okay, I've seen how he is within the structure of the offense. Let's take a look at him outside of the structure. What happens when the play breaks down? Well, Eleby's very comfortable throwing in motion, and he does keep his eyes downfield to take what the defense has given him. Now, I have seen him take off. He's actually shown some unique tendencies in his foot motion. I've seen him do some stutter steps that have gotten some guys, but that's really not his thing. He really does look to throw the ball, which for most offenses, that's exactly what you want. The only kind of offense I think that would want the guy to take off more often than throw a ball downfield is the Baltimore Ravens, and that's just because they have Lamar Jackson at their disposal. So that's a lot of really just solid traits that he's shown. So let's take a look at the negatives now. Well, his time to fully read a defense at an NFL level is going to be slower. He's really mastered this RPO, which kind of triangulates an area for him to read. He can kind of ignore some stuff downfield. So it's going to take him time to get how like the NFL is working. And most QBs do take some time to understand how NFL defenses work. But he did show some flashes actually this year. They ran a lot more traditional passing sets this year at Western Michigan, and he did fairly well. So I think he has the ability to do it, but I would not expect it of him. This is not going to be a, Russell Wilson type of thing. This is not going to be a Justin Herbert type of thing where it just clicks for him and almost immediately. It's really not going to happen. Now, I also did mention that he can move out of the pocket and he does look to pass downfield. While he can move out of the pocket, I think his top end speed and quickness, it's really not as good as you'd want for a guy who can get plays out of coverage, right? When things are breaking down. I think he could get yardage. I don't expect him to do it though, and I think teams will see the same thing. They'll see a guy who could maybe buy a couple yards, but he's really not going to take off and gain you much. And I think he can absolutely be tracked down from behind by these better athletic edge rushers. They're going to be coming at him. Now, I did mention his comfort in RPOs. However, especially when I was watching him in 2021, they didn't do as much in 2022. Or not 2022, pardon me. In 2020, I watched it. It showed better improvement in 2021. But in 2020, his handoffs and RPOs could be slow, meaning he's probably processing that triangular section of the defense a little longer than it should be. So for him to show that improvement in 2021 is a positive, but he was already a senior. It took him a good while to triangulate that section of the field and be able to operate his RPO at a speed that will be required at the NFL. So he showed some really nice flashes of comfort and solid game, kind of game manager. You hear that term thrown out a lot where a guy just manages the game, makes the throws needed. It's nothing really out of structure too often. He does that. He lets his playmakers do the work. I think a team should be looking at him in the 5th round for that really solid backup play. Teams are going to be taking shots on these bigger name guys early, more likely than not. So to get a guy like Eleby, who if you're like, I just need a solid backup, well, he's probably going to be available to you probably a lot later than what I have him valued at. But even if you do get him in the 5th, I think that is absolutely appropriate value. And for our last ones to watch player, this is one of the last players I watched on offense. I have watched 230 players tape on offense, watching both their senior bowls, any tape they've had over the years, their recent games. Garbers was one of the guys that stood out. How do I really put it even? He can make these plays where you just go, how? How are you still up? How are you still in a position to throw? And how did you get that ball there on time? It's polarizing. Like when I say polarizing plays, it is polarizing. It's not quite at the Mahomes level or the Russell Wilson level or the Josh Allen who's really come into his own as of late. It's not quite there, But it's surprising for a guy that's really gotten no talking with scouts at all. He can really make stuff just work, and it works that well because he's got these really nice feel of the pockets. He's got this just ability to extend plays and keep the play extending like for an incredible amount of time. There was a play I saw him extend it for, I think I counted a solid 16 seconds, which is insane when you think that the average time that QB has once they get the ball snapped to them is about 3 seconds before something gets home. For him to keep that play alive for 16 seconds looking for something to work, quite impressive. And that works so well as well because he keeps his eyes downfield. Rarely does he opt to run unless he absolutely needs to and he feels that pressure coming from behind him. So he can get yards with his legs. He's got that bigger frame that we see like Sam Howell in this draft where he can take the hits if needed. He can shoulder it, which means, you hope in the next level that means he can actually keep healthy. He can be more available to you. It's nice to see. Now, his arm strength is something that I've seen be of question, and I think it should be of question. I do think it is absolutely NFL caliber. And you can see it on these like deep ball placement he's got. The placement on those deep balls when he actually got it there was beautiful. It was on time, in a place where only his guy could get it, and it got him there basically in stride. No issues. Now, I'll quickly talk about it as a negative. He passes off his back foot more often than you like, which that basically means he's not utilizing the full strength that his lower half is going to give him when especially tacking the ball downfield, right? He's basically having to arm it. It's all just upper body for him, which is why you see the ball not always get there on those deep throws. It's something a team could work out, but for it to be pretty consistent over the last couple years, it's gotten a little better in this last year. It's something of note and something teams will have to understand that this is going to take time to work out when they're looking at drafting him. Now, talking about his mentality, he shows these really nice flashes of just great processing of these defenses. He's already ran a very pro style offense, right? Basically taking the ball in shotgun or I form, like where he's under center, right? No motion even. So he's very comfortable running what's already deemed a pro style offense, which would be a positive for teams. And rarely does it really make these poor decisions. I think a lot of what his poor decisions come off of is his uncomfort in the pocket when he feels like he really isn't going to have a lot of time. And from him throwing off that back foot, I think is where you see his errors really show up. So I guess I should just move this right into the negatives now, where his uncomfort in the pocket, where he can kind of lean to the right and back, it's going to be iffy because he's probably going to get pressured more than he in the NFL than he was at California. However, if he gets a team with, better blocking or that understands how to scheme their lineup better, right? So let's talk about Jabel going to the Giants, who's probably going to invest heavily in the offensive line. He schemes that lineup to actually get his guy more time than probably that would be natural for just a basic snap of the football. So something like that, if you were to give Garbers, might actually help that issue and help weed that bad habit out faster than actually predicted. So it's really getting that back foot and that uncomfort after like multiple hits because he got hit a lot at California. Guys really came for him behind that offensive line. For him to be able to weed that out and for a team to see, okay, I can clearly see his two biggest issues and think I can weed that out, it's something to keep him note. Now, what I did said he can run the ball, right? He's got a Sam Howell build. Howell's a much better runner of the ball, like much better. He runs out of necessity, where Howell runs because he knows he can get it, and it really shows in Garber's play when he is going to go for the first down. and you see him go to slide. I've seen him almost slide Joe Burrow like at the very beginning, if you remember, in Burrow's rookie season, where he slides and he's very upright. Guys are going to clock him if he does that at the NFL level, which is worrisome because you don't want to see him get hurt and you don't want to see him get concussed. So a team's gonna have to honestly work on his comfort in sliding, his comfort in getting downfield, right? When it's like, okay, it's time to run. I can't look downfield any longer. We really don't want these 16, second plays behind snap really to be a normalized thing. So teams are gonna have to realize that as well. While he can get moving, he needs to work in his comfort in taking the ball downfield. So he's got mechanics that need to be some fixed, but the traits he demonstrated could make him a sound kind of developed QB in the NFL. He could have a long career if a team actually does work on those tendencies with him. And I think it's going to be something QBs are all should be striving for, but rarely ever meet. So if a team thinks they can do it with Garbers, and I think it is absolutely possible with Garbers, I think a 6th round pick for him is totally accurate value, right? When we're drafting guys that late down the board, you start looking for tendencies, traits, or high level IQ, right? Guys who have maybe played different positions, stuff like that. I think Garbers fits some of those or checks off some of those boxes, so to speak, where he has a lot of high IQ play. He has a lot of that more unique tendencies later on. So I think a team drafting in the 6th should look at him around there and look for him to possibly develop some how do I say more comfortable mechanics maybe behind an NFL line. So that'll be the last pair we have. And I hope to have the defensive players out maybe within a week or two's time, and I'll also have the combine numbers by then. Thank you for watching. Take care.